Hey everybody, I have yet another installment in our little RPG shoot 'em up, enter the gungeon, shmup game, and I want to keep these installments small so that you can kind of pick and choose the ones you need to refer to. So last time we made the AI a little bit intelligent. Basically, we kind of gave it the ability to kind of sort of see. This time around, I want to make it a little bit smarter and also give it, some make it more usable. Okay, so the first thing I did is if you look at our game here, and I'm going to go ahead and run the example. So you'll see there should be at least one NPC that's spawning here, and immediately things look a little bit different. If I look in the game view and I kind of come down here, you'll see the little arrow that's rotating around our NPC. So I can do my best to try to run around and evade him. You'll see once it sees me, I have a hard time doing it. I have to kind of basically go far enough away, or we can see in our debugging window here, if I'm far enough away, it starts to not pay attention. If I'm close, but it's not looking in my direction, I can also get away. But if I am too close, it's looking in my direction, and there's nothing in the way, it will start shooting at me. It will lock onto me and start shooting onto me. So let's see. Let me put myself right here. It can see me now. You can also see that if I put this shrub, this tree, in between, it will also stop locking onto me. Okay, because it can't see me through this tree. There's kind of a weird thing that happens. You'll see it sort of unlocks after it shoots the coin, and that's sort of a bug in that the way that the layers are set up. I'm just using the same coin throwing algorithm as I used for the little player itself. And the problem is that the coin is not invisible to the NPC. So the moment the NPC throws a coin, it can no longer see me because the coin is in the way. So that's one sort of bug. I'll leave that to be fixed in the future. So let's talk about first how I change the NPC to add that little arrow indicator. Now, I found in my library of stuff from the Tiny RPG town, inside, I think it's in Sprites. I'm going to let you hunt around inside the artwork and so on to find something that's like that arrow. I won't spend too much time looking for it at the moment. But let's look at the prefab that we had created, the prefab for the NPC. So the NPC is still the same. It has a sprite renderer, it has the box collider, rigid body, and it has this enemy AI script on it. But you'll notice over here in its hierarchy, there's an NPC, there's something called a rotator, and there's an arrow. Okay, so the rotator, we have this sort of in two parts, because the arrow we want to have, and there's other ways to do this that are a little bit trickier to do, with actual rotations and quaternions and so on. I'm going to do this in kind of a simple way that doesn't require too much knowledge of other fancier features. And I'm going to basically say, all right, what I'm going to do is I have the NPC, which is, centered in the screen, in the scene. And then I want to rotate something around that, right? So I have the rotator. What should happen is the NPC, we'll make the NPC at 0, 0. All right. The NPC is at 0, 0. The rotator should also now be at 0, 0. And the arrow has an offset. This is the important part. The arrow has an offset. And that basically puts the arrow outside of the NPC and subject to the rotation. So if I rotate the rotator, right, that's going to rotate the rotator and all of its children relative to the parent, right? So that's why I can rotate around the player, or the NPC in this case, right? If I didn't have that separation, if I didn't have a child kind of structure here, a little bit of hierarchy, they would all just rotate around the center, and that's tricky. So this is a simple way to do that. So you create a child, and then you can offset the child, and kind of take it from there. All right. So that's what I did. So the NPC has a child, which is just an empty object that just is going to allow me to rotate everything that are children of that according to that 0 position that it shares with the NPC. And then the arrow is just going to be offset and used as an indicator rotating around. And it's also going to be used as a launching point for any coins that get shot. Okay, so that's what that's doing. Now, the enemy AI script is where all the magic is happening once again. So the start is the same, except I've also added this thing called last time, which just keeps track of the last time that a coin was launched. So I initialize that in start. I've changed a couple of things in my local or my class variables here. I had that last time, which is persistent, sticks around inside the instance. I also have a prefab for the coin, so I can initialize that prefab. And then in update, some of this should look familiar, some of this will look a little bit different. So we still have our debugging information to draw the lines to see the engagement, right? We're checking the hero's position versus the NPC's position, because this script is on the NPC. And that is going to, now, interesting part here, we said, okay, if engaged, and the NPC starts off not engaged. The NPC hasn't seen the player, so it's not engaged. And what does it do in that case? It just kind of rotates that rotator around, kind of looking for, aimlessly looking, just sort of rotating and rotating, seeing if it sees anything. So it just rotates that position. And it does that by saying, okay, 90 degrees per second, scaled by a delta time, so that it should be smoothly rotating. All right, so that's that part. And then after it checks that, it also says, okay, let's set engage to false. Because what happens in here, in this AI bit, this part that says, okay, does it see the player? That's what's really going to cause it to be engaged. Okay, so the first thing we do is we check that magnitude. Is it within 5 meters, we'll say. And if it is, then it draws the line, debug indicator. All right. We still have check our line mask, check our line cast, check for colliders in the way. All right. So it's going to say, all right, are there any colliders in the way? If not, then let's see what did it, what did it collide with? All right. So let's see, what are the colliders that it potentially sees according to this line cast? If it sees that it's the hero, okay, we're going to shoot at the hero. All right. Now, we're actually still doing this. The position is we're doing this from the NPC. The arrow hasn't really come into play yet on this. Okay, so it's from the NPC to the player. The rotator and the arrow, they don't have any colliders on them, so we can sort of ignore them. We don't have to worry about seeing them accidentally here. So that's important. Still, because we don't have any colliders on the arrow or the rotator, they're invisible to everybody. All right. Now we do the same thing. We say, okay, we check, is it the hero? Now it starts to get a little bit different. So now what we're doing, rather than just checking the right transform of the player, which was sort of arbitrarily set last time, saying, oh, the player's always facing in this direction. Now instead, we're saying, all right, let's find the up vector, the up axis of the rotating object. Right, so that gives us the instantaneous, like, where is it facing? Where is the arrow pointing? Okay, so now it's more active. So we're saying, okay, let's check the dot product of that up normalized, just in case, against the vector that points at the player no matter what, pointing at our hero. Right? So we know that if that is greater than whatever threshold we want a little fairly narrow threshold, we say, okay, if it's greater than that, then the player sees, or the NPC sees the player, right? Because it was pointing its rotator within a certain angle, within a certain amount of that, of the player, right? So it sees it. This should be similar. This is familiar. Okay, we can show that, draw that line from the player, from the NPC to the the hero, and we draw that in red. And here's where the final bit of magic happens. We say, all right, now what we want to do is we want to change the up transform, the up vector, the up axis, right? The green axis of that game object. We set that to be the direction in which we would have to face the player. So we just say hvector.normalize. So we point directly at the player at that point, or at least we point the rotator directly at the player, right? So now the rotator snaps on and is locked on to the player. And we say, all right, we are now engaged. We see him. Okay, we could ask him a question. We could do something. What we're going to do is throw a coin at him, right? So we say down here, this is very similar to sort of what we had done in class with regards to the player throwing coins. But now in this case, we're going to make it so that the NPC is going to throw the coins, right? So we say if we're engaged, we check when was the last time we threw a coin. We're only going to be allowed to throw a coin every 2 seconds, the NPC here. Okay, that's what timed. We check the current time minus the last time we threw a coin. We say, is that greater than 2? Is it greater than 2 seconds? If so, go ahead, throw another coin. So we have a temporary, so we can temporarily hold the instantiated coin object. We want to instantiate coin prefab, and we're going to instantiate it at the arrow's position. This is a little funky here, right? It's not the NPC, it's not the rotator, it's the arrow, right? So what we did here is we use this find, and I think I used that earlier on as well. Maybe I didn't explain it up there. So I can, given the game object I'm currently on, you know, the transform of the game object I'm currently on, I can find its children, right? Find a reference to the game objects that are children of this game object. So rotator is a child of the NPC. The arrow is a child of that rotator. So I'm kind of traveling down this hierarchy here. And then I use the arrow's position to be the spawning point for my new coin. Quaternion identity, because I'm not going to spin, I'm not going to rotate that coin or anything. I'm just going to instantiate it there at that position. And then the next thing I do is I give the coin some velocity. So my new coin that I've instantiated, temp here, I set the velocity to point in the direction of the rotator, right? However the rotator is rotated, that up, that's going to determine the velocity of the flipped coin, the thrown coin, times 10. Right, so that allows the NPC to throw a coin in that direction with that velocity. Last but not least, I set last time to time so that I know the last time I flipped a coin or I threw a coin, right? So that's the basics. That's how we did giving the enemy AI the bit to see the player and then to potentially react, right? You'll see it's locked on and it says, okay, after 2 seconds, or if it's been longer than 2 seconds since I last locked on, I can then shoot at the player or flip coins at the player. Okay, and how you tune this, you know, how close to the player, how close, and what that dot product, what the threshold of that dot product is, that's going to determine sort of how quick the player or the enemy reacts. You can also do things like, well, I want the player to be able to walk faster than the whatchamahoots, our little NPC can rotate. That's something we could change as well. We can also do like, so you don't instantly lock on, you could sort of like interpolate the locking on, things like that. We'll talk about that later. All right, that should be hopefully reasonably bite-sized episode. Take care, talk to you later, see you in virtual class.